it was always going to come to this. The very same Republicans who swallowed their principles, removed their spines, silenced their deep concerns about Donald Trump's lack of principles or stability or sanity, are the very same ones today sounding the loudest alarms about Donald Trump's foreign policy. Prominent Republicans now openly and publicly wondering if the leader of their party, their movement, and the country appears to be on the verge of making a deal with Iran that leaves the United States of America worse off than before the war with Iran began, as Donald Trump now finds himself stuck between relaunching a deeply unpopular war that is causing deep economic anxiety and pain for every American and eroding his political coalition and the standing of his party, or, curtain number two, accepting a deal with Iran that has the potential to leave the current Iranian regime strengthened and in a stronger position with more leverage than they were in and than they had at the start of the war. Republican Senator Roger Wicker, who notably is the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, wrote this, quote, "The rumored 60-day ceasefire with the belief that Iran will ever engage in good faith would be a disaster. Everything accomplished by Operation Epic Fury would be for naught!" Exclamation point from Mr. Wicker. Texas Republican Ted Cruz had this to say, quote, "I am deeply concerned about what we are hearing about an Iran deal," in quotes, being pushed by some voices in the administration. That the result of all that is to be an Iranian regime still run by Islamists who chant death to America, now receiving billions of dollars, being able to enrich uranium and develop nuclear weapons, and having effective control over the Strait of Hormuz, then that outcome would be a dangerous mistake, end quote, from Ted Cruz. Even Lindsey Man-It-Was-Fun Graham is saying the quiet part out loud these days. Quote, "It makes one wonder why the war started to begin with, if these perceptions are accurate," end quote. Now, time will tell if Lindsey Graham or Ted Cruz or Roger Wicker, for that matter, these ride-or-die allies of the president's, who have today become voices of dissent over the framework or outlines of a deal with Iran, will fall into line as they have every single time over the last decade. But in the same way the broken clock is right twice a day, Lindsey Graham is getting to a fundamental truth and unanswered question about the war with Iran. It has never been clear to the vast majority of the American people why the war was started to begin with, or what the objectives were, or when we would know we'd succeeded. In the early days of the war, Donald Trump had called for regime change very publicly, saying help is on the way. But Iran's brutal dictator has been replaced with that brutal dictator's son. Then it was said that the point of the war with Iran, this was something Marco Rubio said publicly, was to eliminate Iran's missile program and nuclear program and degrade their military. But we know that U.S. intelligence believes that Iran has retained significant military capabilities and that the nuclear program has hardly been damaged. Now, as Tom Nichols writes in The Atlantic, quote, "Now the president will end up having to sign off on a set of terms that will likely make the JCPOA, the Iran deal signed by the Obama administration, look demanding by comparison." And the U.S. proposals, the New York Times reports, quote, "focuses on ending Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, something that was not an issue before the war started. In any case, Donald Trump may not get the chance to sign off on any deal, as the ceasefire is looking very shaky at the moment. U.S. forces launching strikes overnight, what CENTCOM said were, quote, self-defense strikes on missile sites and Iranian boats that were planting mines. Iran's regime is threatening to retaliate against these new strikes. Donald Trump lurching toward a potential endgame with the war in Iran is where we begin today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Deputy Secretary of State, former Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman is here. She led the U.S. negotiating team that reached an agreement on the Iran nuclear deal in 2015. Also joining us, the aforementioned staff writer at The Atlantic, Tom Nichols, is here. He's a professor emeritus of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College. Ben Rhodes will join us in a moment. Ambassador Sherman, let me start with you and your thoughts on these very notable as I call them, ride or die allies of Donald Trump, sounding very public alarms about what's been reported about a possible deal.
I feel like it's a little bit of deja vu, because when we were doing the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, better known as the Iran nuclear deal, these were the voices that were saying it is a bad deal. It doesn't take care of everything. It doesn't stop everything forever. Indeed, it was a deal that was quite sustainable for a long time and certainly could have been extended through swift and good negotiations. That said, we're in a very different place now, as you pointed out. Before the president started this war of choice, this ill choice, the Strait of Hormuz was open. There was freedom of navigation. And now he has to spend all of his time figuring out how to open the Strait of Hormuz, end our blockade, get gas prices down, which will take at least 2 or 3 months to be achieved once this is accomplished, all the while not really having started negotiating on the nuclear issues,
right.
Figuring out how to verify or monitor any of it, including the end of the Strait of Hormuz. So lots of details and very little substance so far.
I mean, let me just ask you, I mean, it seems like an undeniable conclusion to say that we are worse off. We are in a worse position in terms of leverage and accomplishments now than before the war started. What, I mean, I want to say, what were they thinking? But I don't, I mean, if you have, what were they thinking, Ambassador?
I have no idea. I've stopped trying to understand how the president thinks, other than sometimes being quite impulsive. Look, we always knew, and every administration, Democrat and Republican, had gamed out the use of the Strait of Hormuz as leverage. This was nothing new. We had all gamed out that, in fact, it could start an Arab-Persian war, that Iran could attack our allies and partners in the Gulf. This is nothing new. But in fact, President Trump moved forward, and all of those things happened. So the points of leverage are now quite clear that Iran has. And even if the Strait of Hormuz can be opened, if the blockade ends, if gas prices stabilize over the months ahead, we will be nowhere where we need to be. And we will all understand that at any point, Iran can do this again.
Let me give you a chance to respond to Mike Pompeo, who I think is insulting Trump by insulting you, but I don't think it's quite, I don't think it lands as the flex Mike Pompeo thinks it is, especially once the White House spokesperson, Stephen Chung, gets the F-bombs involved. But let me read you Mike Pompeo's statement and let you respond. Quote, the deal being floated with Iran seems straight out of the Wendy Sherman, Robert Malley, Ben Rhodes playbook. Pay the IRGC to build a WMD program and terrorize the world. Not remotely America first. It's straightforward. Open the damn strait, deny Iran access to money, take out enough Iranian capability so it cannot threaten our allies in the region. Overdue, let's go. I think what he means to do is to threaten Donald Trump's, virility with a comparison, an unfavorable one to you. But what he reveals to the world is that Trump has been completely bamboozled by the people around him who have led him down a path that pales in comparison to the deal you negotiated.
I think Lindsey Graham, in the quote that you showed, said it exactly right. It makes you wonder why we went down this road to begin with, because we are in a place that is much tougher. Look, negotiating with Iran is very difficult. They are tough guys. All guys, and they are the largest state sponsor of terrorism. They aren't. This isn't a regime any of us want, and the president started all this by saying he'd have the backs of the Iranian people. That's gone by the wayside. The president, ostensibly of Iran, started to restore the internet today to give people access, but they've been using VPNs to figure out what's going on in the world. But the lives for Iranian people are worse, not better, than when this all started.
Let me just For close viewers, I'll share what Stephen Chung, the White House spokesperson, had to say in response to Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo has no idea what the F he's talking about. He should shut his stupid mouth and leave the real work to the professionals. He's not related to anything that's happening, so how would he know? With friends like that, I'm not sure who needs enemies, Tom Nichols.
Yeah, that's some top-notch communicating from the communications director right there.
I'm like 10 years retired, and I could have done better than that.
Guy's really on top of his game. And as I said and what I wrote, this was a little glimpse into what I think is kind of sweaty panic inside the White House. That this is all going south on us. Our own allies, our own most sycophantic supporters. I mean, when you're getting scored on by Lindsey Graham, that's got to sting. But there are two. I'll take a whack at the thing you asked Ambassador Sherman. What were they thinking? I think two things are clear. One is that Donald Trump thought this would be a war that would bring him glory. I think that's what he was thinking. I shall be the liberator of Iran. And I think the second thing they were thinking is this regime will collapse. And I think everything we've been going through for the past 2 months, all of these operational successes that aren't amounting to a strategic effect are all because once the regime didn't collapse, you weren't going to get all the other stuff you wanted.
Right.
Had the regime collapsed overnight and a more compliant regime had come into power, you'd say, okay, now we're going to talk about terrorism. Now we're going to talk about the Strait. Now we're going to talk about nuclear stuff. But once that didn't happen, they didn't know what to do. And they still don't know what to do. And I think what you're seeing now is the this kind of panicky, sweaty search for a face-saving exit. I think that's put, it's forcing CENTCOM into saying things like, well, these were self-defense strikes. These are obviously meant to be demonstrative. They're meant to show that we can still hit Iran. But to what end? What is it they think they're going to get out of this now that the regime is obviously going to stay? The Iranian people have been abandoned and now, are, as the ambassador just said, worse off than they were. The notional idea that the Iranians could choke off the Strait of Hormuz is now a reality. And we've spent billions of dollars and a lot of our weapon stocks. And for what?